Most men wearing fragrance are doing it wrong. Wrong concentration, wrong notes, wrong application. This is the complete framework, how scent actually works, what you're paying for, and exactly where to spend your money. One guide, no filler. Chapter 1. Why most men wear fragrance. Wrong, most men approach fragrance the same way they approached their first haircut. They let someone else make the decision. They accepted what was handed to them, and they have been repeating that decision out of habit ever since. The result is that the majority of men wearing fragrance today are wearing the wrong scent for their body chemistry, applying it incorrectly, and spending far more than necessary for what they receive. The fragrance industry generated approximately $52 billion in global revenue in 2023. The average markup from production cost to retail price across designer fragrances sits between 10 and 20 times the manufacturing cost. A bottle of Dior Sauvage retailing at $120 contains approximately $6 to $10 worth of fragrance ingredients, glass, and packaging. The remaining $110 funds marketing, licensing, retail infrastructure, and the celebrity face attached to the campaign. None of that tells you the fragrance is bad. Dior Sauvage is genuinely well constructed and appropriate for a wide range of contexts. What it tells you is that the price of a fragrance has almost no relationship to the quality of the ingredients inside it, and understanding that relationship is the first step toward making better purchasing decisions. The 3 most common application mistakes are spraying on clothing rather than skin, applying too much in a single application, and applying to areas where blood vessels are not close enough to the skin surface to project the scent effectively. All 3 mistakes result in a fragrance performing worse than it would with correct application while using more product per wear than necessary. By the end of this guide, you will not make any of them. Chapter 2. How fragrance actually works. The basics. A fragrance is a mixture of aromatic compounds dissolved in alcohol, typically ethanol, at varying concentrations. When you spray it on skin, the alcohol evaporates rapidly, which is the sharp initial blast you smell immediately after application. What remains is the fragrance compounds themselves, which then evaporate at different rates depending on their molecular weight and volatility. This evaporation sequence is what creates the 3-stage structure of a fragrance: top notes, heart notes, and base notes. Top notes are the lightest, most volatile compounds. They evaporate within 15 to 30 minutes of application and are what you smell when you spray a tester in a store. Citrus notes, light florals, and green notes typically appear as top notes because their molecular structure allows rapid evaporation. This is why a fragrance that smells extraordinary in the store can smell completely different 30 minutes after application on your skin. Heart notes, also called middle notes, emerge as the top notes dissipate. They are more complex compounds with lower volatility that take 30 minutes to 2 hours to fully develop. The heart is where the character of a fragrance lives. Spices, woods, and heavier florals typically appear in the heart. This is the part of the fragrance most people experience when they smell someone wearing a scent and find it appealing. Base notes are the heaviest, least volatile compounds. They do not fully emerge until 1 to 3 hours after application, and they are what you smell on skin at the end of the day. Musks, woods, resins, and ambers typically appear in the base. The base note is what makes a fragrance linger and what creates the dry down that most people remember when they encounter a scent on someone else hours after initial application. The practical implication of this structure is that you should never purchase a fragrance based on how it smells from the bottle or immediately after spraying. Spray it on skin, wait 30 minutes, then evaluate the heart. Come back 3 hours later and evaluate the dry down. The fragrance you are committing to is the one that exists in those 2 windows, not the initial blast of top notes. Chapter 3. Concentration tiers and what they actually mean. Fragrance. Concentration refers to the percentage of aromatic compounds in the total formula. The higher the concentration, the more fragrance per milliliter, the longer it lasts on skin, and generally, the higher the retail price. Understanding these tiers eliminates one of the most common and expensive fragrance purchasing mistakes. Eau de Cologne, or EDC, is the lowest concentration tier at 2 to 5% aromatic compounds in the formula. The remainder is primarily alcohol and water. EDC formulas last 1 to 2 hours on skin and require multiple applications across a day for continuous presence. This is the correct choice for extremely hot climates where stronger concentrations become overwhelming for exercise contexts or for men who want a light, fresh presence that does not project significantly. Eau de toilette, or EDT, runs at 5 to 15% aromatic concentration. This is the most common concentration tier for men's fragrance and the most commercially dominant. EDT formulas last 3 to 5 hours on skin with moderate projection. Most designer fragrances marketed to men exist primarily at the EDT concentration. When a brand releases a fragrance in multiple concentrations, the EDT is typically the most accessible price point and the widest commercial release. Eau de Parfum, or EDP, runs at 15 to 20% aromatic concentration. EDP formulas last 5 to 8 hours on skin with stronger projection than EDT. The higher concentration also typically produces a slightly richer, denser version of the same fragrance because some lighter top note compounds are proportionally less dominant in a higher concentration formula, allowing the heart and base to emerge with more presence. Many men who found an EDT version of a fragrance underwhelming in longevity find the EDP version of the same scent meets their performance expectations. Parfum, also called Extrait de Parfum, runs at 20 to 40% aromatic concentration. This is the highest commercial concentration tier and the longest lasting, with documented longevity of 8 to 12 hours on skin. Parfum formulas are the most expensive per milliliter and require the fewest sprays per application. 1 to 2 sprays of a parfum concentration typically delivers more presence and longevity than 3 to 4 sprays of the EDT equivalent. The practical purchasing decision: if you are buying a fragrance primarily for longevity and you find EDT formulas fading before the end of a working day, move to EDP before spending more money on a different fragrance entirely. The same scent at a higher concentration may solve the performance problem without requiring a new purchase. Chapter 4. The fragrance families and which one you actually need. Fragrance families categorize scents by their dominant aromatic character. Understanding which family works for your chemistry, your context, and your existing wardrobe is more useful than any specific product recommendation because it gives you a framework for evaluating any new fragrance you encounter rather than depending on external validation for each individual purchase. Fresh fragrances use citrus, aquatic, and green notes as their primary aromatic character. They project initially bright and clean, dry down to light woody or musk bases, and are the most widely acceptable category for professional and public contexts because they project minimally and rarely cause discomfort to those nearby. Acqua di Gio by Giorgio Armani is the most commercially successful men's fragrance in history and belongs to this family. Fresh fragrances work well in warmer weather, in confined spaces like offices and public transport, and for men new to fragrance who want something unlikely to generate negative reactions. Woody fragrances use cedar, sandalwood, vetiver, and similar aromatic woods as primary components. They dry down to dense, long-lasting bases that project more significantly than fresh alternatives at equivalent concentrations. Woody fragrances work particularly well in cooler months when heavier base notes require the ambient temperature to project effectively without becoming overwhelming. Terre d'Hermès and Bleu de Chanel are widely referenced examples from the designer tier. Oriental fragrances use resins, spices, and sweet ambers as primary components, producing warm, dense, and long-projecting scents appropriate for evening and cold weather contexts. Oriental fragrances typically require careful application quantity control because over-application in warm conditions or confined spaces creates the kind of overwhelming scent presence that generates negative responses. 1 to 2 sprays maximum in the EDT concentration is the correct starting point for any Oriental fragrance. Fougère fragrances, from the French word for fern, use a combination of lavender, oak moss, and coumarin to create the classic barbershop accord that dominated men's fragrance from the 1960s through the 1990s. Drakkar Noir and Cool Water are well-known examples. Fougère fragrances project confidently, read as traditionally masculine in most cultural contexts, and work effectively across a wide temperature range. They are the most versatile family for professional contexts that require a clear scent presence without leaning toward the sweetness of Oriental alternatives. Spicy fragrances use pepper, cardamom, cinnamon, and similar aromatic spices as primary components, typically blended with woody or musky bases. They project warmly and work best in autumn and winter conditions where the cooler ambient temperature allows the spice notes to develop fully without accelerating towards sweetness. Chapter 5. Application: the 4 rules that change everything. Application method has more impact on a fragrance's performance than the fragrance itself in many cases. Correct application produces more longevity, better projection, and a more accurate representation of what the fragrance is actually designed to smell like. Incorrect application wastes product and produces worse results regardless of the quality of the fragrance. Rule 1. Apply to pulse points on bare skin. Pulse points are areas where blood vessels run close to the skin surface, generating warmth that activates the aromatic compounds and projects them outward. The primary pulse points for fragrance application are the inner wrists, the neck just below the jaw on both sides, the inner elbow, and the chest at the sternum. These points provide continuous low heat that diffuses the fragrance outward through the day. Applying to clothing does not produce this effect because fabric does not generate body heat, and applying to clothing in some cases damages fabric through the alcohol content in the formula. Rule 2. Do not rub. Rubbing the wrists together after application is one of the most common and damaging fragrance mistakes. The friction generated by rubbing breaks down the top note compounds and disrupts the normal evaporation sequence, producing a muddied version of the fragrance's intended opening and reducing the top note lifespan by 30 to 50% compared to spraying and leaving undisturbed. Rule 3. Spray the correct number of times. The correct number of sprays for most EDT fragrances in a professional or casual context is 2 to 3. The correct number for EDP is 1 to 2. The correct number for parfum is 1, sometimes 2 on pulse points. More than 3 sprays of any EDT fragrance in a confined space is the threshold at which fragrances begin generating negative responses from people in the immediate environment. The goal is detectable at conversational distance, not announced from across the room. Rule 4. Moisturize before applying. Fragrance lasts longer on hydrated skin than on dry skin because the aromatic compounds have more to bind to and evaporate from at a slower rate. Unscented lotion applied to pulse points before fragrance application can extend longevity by 30 to 60 minutes in documented testing. If you find fragrances consistently fading faster than their concentration suggests they should, dry skin may be the cause rather than the fragrance formula itself. Chapter 6. Where to actually spend your money. The designer tier, Dior, Chanel, Tom Ford, Armani, produces consistently well-constructed fragrances backed by experienced perfumers and genuine quality control. The markups are significant, but the products are reliable, and the investment in the aromatic compounds is real, even if the celebrity campaign inflates the retail price substantially. Dior Sauvage EDT at $120 for 100 milliliters is the most commercially successful men's fragrance currently available. It uses ambroxan as its primary base note compound, a synthetic musk with exceptional skin projection and longevity, and a lemmy spice in the heart. It works in most contexts, on most body chemistries, and in most seasons without significant adjustment in application. It is the safest large purchase in men's fragrance today. Bleu de Chanel E. DP at $165 for 100 milliliters is a woody, fresh fragrance with a sophisticated dry down that works across professional and evening contexts without reading as either too casual or too formal. The EDP concentration delivers measurably better longevity than the EDT, making the price difference between concentrations worth calculating before purchasing. The niche tier, Maison, Margiela, Replica, Byredo, Le Labo, Diptyque, produces fragrances at higher price points with more complex and less commercially calibrated aromatic profiles. Maison Margiela Replica. Jazz Club at $185 for 100 milliliters uses tobacco leaf, vetiver, and rum in a composition that is genuinely distinctive without being inaccessible. It is the most frequently recommended niche starting point for men transitioning from designer fragrance. The affordable alternatives tier provides comparable aromatic profiles to designer flagships at fractions of the retail price. Zara Vibrant Leather at $30 for 100 milliliters produces a fragrance widely documented by independent reviewers as occupying the same aromatic territory as Dior Homme Intense at $180. Armaf Club de Nuit Intense Man at $40 for 105 milliliters performs in the same space as Creed Aventus at $435. These are not identical fragrances. They are similar enough that the performance gap does not justify the price gap for most buyers who are not dedicated fragrance collectors. The sample and decant market solves the most expensive fragrance problem of all. Discovering that a fragrance you have never worn on your specific skin chemistry is not what you expected after spending $150 on a full bottle. Decant services, including Scentbird, Parfums Raffi, and multiple independent decant sellers on Fragrance Community. Platforms allow purchase of 2 to 10 milliliter samples from full bottles for $5 to $20. 1 month of wearing a 2 milliliter sample, approximately 20 to 30 applications, provides more accurate information about how a fragrance performs on your chemistry and in your daily context than any number of reviews, spray tests on paper strips, or first impressions from the bottle. Never purchase a full bottle of a fragrance you have not worn on skin for at least 1 full day. Never purchase based on another person's experience because body chemistry variation is large enough that a fragrance that performs exceptionally on someone else can smell entirely different on you. The sample is not optional. It is the only purchasing process that produces consistent satisfaction. Chapter 7. Building a wardrobe. Of scent, the most common fragrance purchasing mistake after the initial one is treating fragrance as a single product category rather than as a wardrobe with contextual applications. One fragrance worn in every context is the equivalent of wearing the same shoes to a job interview, a beach, a gym, and a formal dinner. Technically possible, practically suboptimal. The minimum functional fragrance wardrobe for a man who wears fragrance regularly is 3 bottles covering different contextual and seasonal needs. A fresh or light woody EDT for daytime professional and warm weather use. A richer woody or fougere EDP for evenings and cooler weather. A light citrus or aquatic for exercise and casual weekend contexts. Those 3 bottles do not need to come from the same brand, the same price tier, or the same fragrance family. They need to cover different parts of the contextual and seasonal range without overlapping. A man who owns Dior Sauvage EDT, an Oriental EDP for winter evenings, and a light citrus EDT for summer and exercise has a functional scent wardrobe that covers every situation he is likely to encounter. The seasonality of fragrance is not arbitrary. It reflects the physics of evaporation. Warm summer temperatures accelerate evaporation, which amplifies projection dramatically. A fragrance that projects pleasantly in October may become overwhelming in July at the same application quantity because the heat increases the rate at which aromatic compounds leave the skin surface. Heavier oriental and dense woody fragrances work best in autumn and winter for this reason. Fresh and light fragrances work best in spring and summer. The final principle is personal chemistry. 2 men can wear the same fragrance with meaningfully different results because skin, pH, diet, medication, hydration level, and natural body odor all interact with aromatic compounds to produce a combined scent that is unique to the individual. This is why someone else's fragrance recommendation is a starting point for sampling rather than a purchasing decision. Your skin is the final variable in every fragrance equation. Test everything before buying. Wear it for a full day before committing. Trust your own chemistry over every review ever written. That is the only rule in fragrance that has no exceptions.